very good evening and welcome to the talk. I am Danish Manzoor, and today we are going to talk about a very important state in India, Karnataka, which is often termed as the Silicon Valley of India. Since we talk about Silicon Valley, the first thing that comes to mind is information technology. And who better than to talk about this topic of IT, BT and tourism as well than the Cabinet Minister of the state, Mr. Priyank Kharge. Priyank, welcome to the show. It's really an honor to have you over here. Now, talking about the information technology, BT and tourism, how are you able to manage these three ministries at one point of time, given the fact that IT itself in Karnataka is a very huge industry?
Well, that's a tricky question, but then it's a good portfolio to have, and it's good to see that convergence also happening, not just in technologies but also in the departments. So, well, anyway, I have a good team to yes, so I ride heavily on them.
Right, wonderful. Now, coming to IT, since you've taken over as the minister of this particular department, what changes have you seen happening in the whole infrastructure in terms of, when it comes to infra and it comes to the whole ecosystem of information technology in Karnataka?
I think there's been a very huge shift when it comes to the IT in Karnataka. Earlier we were based heavily on services. Our economy was based heavily on services alone, and that has morphed into R&D hubs. So today we are also one of the top 5 R&D ecosystems in the world, and that has also spun off a lot of innovations. So from services to R&D to now being the innovation capital of India, and also we are the second best ecosystem for startups. So I see that shift slowly moving from services to innovation. I think that's a very good thing that is happening for the country from Bangalore, and we are heavily concentrating on trying to see how we can help this ecosystem, not only in services but also in R&D and
So any future plans which you have in terms of IT, BT, and especially with regards to these two things, tourism we'll talk about a bit later, about IT and BT, what are the plans that the government has in the days to come?
See, we are a very focused lot here in our state, and with respect to IT, we are heavily focused on trying to build skills in emerging technologies. So you see there's a lot of talk on employment, there's a lot of talk on retrenchment. So we are trying to see how I can make my graduates or dropouts more employable. So skilling is a very important aspect for my department, especially in the emerging technologies. And the other thing that we are concentrating is how we can ensure more startups succeed within our ecosystem. So we are trying to give a great thrust to ensure innovation and invention happen here in my state, because once if I'm able to stimulate the ecosystem for innovation, ideation and invention, I'm sure to get investment. Right. So we are concentrating on these two things majorly.
Right. Now you spoke about skilling the people. That's again a very important factor over here. Job creation has been a major issue in India at this point of time. But how exactly do you think the government would be able to intervene in this? Because it is also very heavily interlinked with the education system also, how people are educated, whether they are employable or not. How does the government get into this, and how does specifically the IT department get into this?
So we are talking to the higher education department also, and we are trying to see how we can have some course correction for the next academic year. But besides that, we are also coming up with our own centers of excellence, which are quick interventions for skill building and incubation and innovation centers, wherein we are trying to ensure that we build these centers of excellence in partnership with the industry. So they give the skill sets, they give the curriculum, we train them in these centers.
PPP model?
Yes, it's a PPP model, wherein we are coming up with centers of excellence in AI, big data. We have already come up with centers of excellence in aerospace and space, cybercrime, cyber security, animation and gaming. So we are talking the language of a futurist industry. And this is all our partners are from the industry, so it's an industry-based training. So that's why I'm so confident that you will have the most employable graduates from my state.
Right, wonderful. So what does the future behold for ITBT in Karnataka?
I think the future is in emerging technologies. Like I said, that's why I've been harping on my every second sentence is innovation and invention. And we are betting big on disruptive and creative technologies.
Right.
And we are trying to see how we can encourage our youngsters to take up more of these. So that leap of faith is something that the government can promise them. And we're just headed there.
Right. So a lot of people that I've met, they have been speaking about the lack of infrastructure in Bangalore. They're saying this becomes a major hindrance when in a city to cover 5 kilometers, it takes you more than an hour at one point of time. So how do you think that time lost in travel, it makes for a huge, it becomes it puts everything on a back foot in the IT capital of India in one way or the other. So how much of the lack of infrastructure do you think is affecting the IT sector and PD sector in your state?
See, I wouldn't call it lack of infrastructure. What we are facing is the tremendous growth in a city.
Right.
I was just reading a report today which said that out of the top 100 fastest growing cities, 25 of them are in India.
Right.
And the fastest is Bangalore.
Right.
And when a city is growing this fast, which is producing the highest number of graduates, which is producing the highest number of employment, it's quite naturally a lot of people from outside also come. Right. And we are growing faster than our policies.
Right.
And it's a problem with any growing city. It's not that you don't have traffic jams in New York, London, or Silicon Valley. There are other issues,
right.
Or even in other Indian metros of Delhi. If we recollect, Gurugram had a traffic jam for 2 days apparently.
Right.
So, not that I'm not taking responsibility for these things. Yes, it's a problem. We understand that, and the government is working towards it. See, we have given 8,000 crores for infrastructure development for Bangalore,
right.
And we have come up with tender shore roads.
Right.
Progress is always happening. It's a growth of a city is always a work in progress.
Right. So the city Bangalore, when we speak of it, has been expanding. Right. When would you want to put a stop to it and look for an alternative city which you can develop? Because don't you think that beyond a point, the governments also need to stop investing in one city and look for other cities in the state and develop?
Hey, that's a misconception.
Right.
If you have a look at our industrial policy or the IT policy, we have always encouraged companies to go beyond Bangalore.
Right.
So today you have aerospace SEZ in Belagavi, you have a lot of IT happening in Mangalore and Mysuru. It's happening in Hubli. Just our rural tier 2 IT exports is worth close to around 4,000 to 5,000 crores. So it's a lot of people. Of course, if you compare it to the Bangalore exports, it's very small. But the incentives we give if you go and invest outside, the subsidies you get, the help from the government you get, is tremendous.
Are the companies taking it?
Most of them are, but everybody likes to
stay in the
main city. So,
right. So is that a challenge for you in the days to come?
You see, you cannot put a stop to a growing city. It's not in your hands. But what we could do is, of course, improve infrastructure, like you rightly pointed out, and also build infrastructure in other cities so that it makes. We can try to build satellite towns, which we already are.
Right.
So we're trying to look at Mysuru as a satellite town, Hubli as a satellite town, which we are. I think we are considerably successful as well.
Right. Now, speaking of the startup potential of the state, often we have seen a lot of incubators that government also sponsors, and we've seen a lot of people getting into the startup ecosystem. Do you think that at some point of time we will be overdoing the entire startup thing?
How can you overdo innovation?
Innovation
startup. Innovation is nothing but startup is just a way of creating. It's a legal entity for creating innovation. So the thing is that that also cannot be stopped. It's a constant work in progress, and I don't think we should put a stop to it also, because the way things are changing, with so much of disruption happening everywhere, with mobile in everybody's hand, digital assets with going viral everywhere, and people wanting things done more quickly, more faster. They want to improve their own productivity. They want to enhance their efficiency. So I think there is no cap to that at all.
There's a word in India called jugaad, right? And somehow I've often seen personally also a lot of people using that word for really wonderful innovations and belittling those innovations. Now, what does the government of Karnataka plan to do with brilliant innovations which come across the government and the departments?
See, there is this thing on the street that they say that entire country works on jugaad, right from the top level of governments to the bottom level of right down to the bottom of the pyramid. And always we Indians are used to these things. We are very hands-on, so we don't really need a lab or an incubator to do things. But having said that, they're all temporary. You cannot run innovation on jugaad. You cannot run inventions on jugaad. So it has to be more systematic. It has to be more structured, because you cannot play 2020. Yes, you cannot play 2020. It's a test cricket. So although when you look at the companies that we have given grants to, or we encourage, or we incubate, there are not many jugaad startups. There are not many jugaad companies there. There are proper startups who have a vision, who are either trying to create something in their vertical or disrupt the current set of things in their vertical. So jugaad is always there, but then we have to choose.
Right. So a lot of people in the industry have been saying that all the incubators, the success rate of the startups which are there in the incubator is very low. Is the government concerned about that all the startups which are there, especially in the government-funded, indirectly government-funded incubators, that the success rate isn't much and dropout rate is much more?
See, I wouldn't say that the success rate that are being incubated by the government, it's the 95% of the startups fail. So it's quite surprising that the government gets blamed for that also.
It's not really blamed. No. Is that a concern?
No, it is a concern.
So perhaps do something more from
absolutely, I agree with you. It is a cause of concern, because there is so much of potential if the right thing is done at the right time. And to ensure that more startups succeed is why we have created a startup cell, why we have come up with why we have created properties like Elevate 100, why we are collaborating so much with private entrepreneurs. We talk to VCs on behalf of them. We give them opportunities to work within the government. We help them with idea validation, market access, customer acquisition. We have something called the Startup Booster Kit for them. So we are doing all we can to ensure that they succeed. But even their product or service should be disruptive. You cannot take, like you pointed out earlier, it cannot be a jugaad.
You can't push every idea.
Yes, you can't push it. So even if I am able to reduce the failure to 90%, which is currently 90%, that itself is a big success for us.
Right. Now, speaking of another big issue, the elephant in the room, apart from this one, which is the IT layoffs, which has been happening. A lot of people lost their jobs. And what was your stand on that? And how do you think that IT as an industry can tackle that and ensure that something of a balance is struck?
See, during I think it's reduced in the last couple of months. When it was at its peak, I had conversations with the industry bodies. I had conversations with the IT employees as well, and everybody was clear on one thing, that yes, there is a strong need for reskilling in emerging technology. See, the freshers were not getting dropped out. The people with 10 to 15 years of experience, or 15 to 20 years, yes. So I think that's where there was a problem. And when we spoke to the industry, they said there is a lot of disruption happening, and it will continue for some time. And we did all we can to ensure that people get reskilled and put back as well. So it is a very difficult thing to do, but we are trying our best to ensure that.
A lot of people were also in favoring having unions in the IT sector. I personally have no opinion about that, but what's your take on that?
See, as long as there are, having a new union does not necessarily all your problems are solved. It's just another platform for you to represent, to fight for your rights if there are any violations. But then somehow this vertical sector had always been left out. There was an exemption for that, and we will look at granting permissions for unions when the policy tenure ends. I mean, till then, I don't think. There is, because we need to attract investments.
Sure.
It's not that by having a union, it's not that investments will stop, or by not having a union, investments will come in more. But it's my job to also create jobs.
Wonderful.
So if I don't create employment, how can I? How will we survive?
Correct.
So it's a very thin line between investments, creating, getting investments, creating jobs, keeping everybody happy through unions or without unions.
Yeah.
It's a very thin line that I have to walk on.
Correct. And now, are there any major happenings which are planned in the days to come, especially with regards to the IT sector? Any big entries in Karnataka, any big in terms of investments or something else?
See, investments again nothing happens overnight. We have to constantly keep knocking at doors. We have to constantly keep. We have to constantly be on our toes, especially now that every state is so fiercely competitive in India.
Right.
So our neighbors keep us busy by granting everything twice as much as we do. So if we set up one park of 10,000 acres, they set up a park of 20,000 acres, free power, free water. So getting investments is always a work in progress. It's always a constant battle with everybody else in India. And yes, I mean, there are a lot of companies in that. So probably in November we'll be announcing a couple of big ticket.
All right, wonderful. So I'll take you up on that one part where you mentioned that a lot of competition is also there from other states. So I am going to meet one of the IT ministers of a similar state, but I want to hear it from your mouth. Which other state, apart from Karnataka, do you think is doing really well in IT is giving tough competition to her?
See, that's a very difficult thing to say because now the spectrum is very wide. Right? So there was this report yesterday where it said that 27% of the startups are here in Bangalore and 23 is in Delhi NCR. So that competition is good. It helps us relook at our policies, relook at our regulations and stuff like that. But again, it's a very tricky thing. There is Maharashtra, of course, which have been traditionally, industrially, we have always been this thing. And now with the new states of Telangana and Andhra being very aggressive, and since everything is driven from the top itself, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu or Mr. KTR, they themselves do everything, talk to the investors. So quite naturally, they're also doing well. Kerala is doing well in animation. Delhi NCR is picking up in fintech, and so is Mumbai. So the spectrum is too wide to say like this is the only thing, because somehow we have managed to get the entire gamut of spectrum right here, whether it's aerospace, whether it's innovation, whether it's services, whether it's skill based. So somehow now we just need to maintain our role by constantly reinventing.
Right, wonderful. Now moving on to tourism. I think that's another big area over here in Karnataka, but somehow a lot of people feel that we don't know much about Karnataka. There isn't much spoken about Karnataka overall, outside India or within India as well. So what is the plan of the government to boost the potential of tourism in Karnataka in the days to come?
So I agree with your point saying that Karnataka has a lot more potential than it currently is delivering to. And that is why we came up with the campaign of Year of the Wild. So it's been now 10 months since we are doing. So it's a sustained, focused campaign showcasing the wildlife of Karnataka. Because we have the highest number of Asiatic elephants, we have the highest number of tigers, we've got great backwaters, we've got the Western Ghats, we've got great beaches. And so we took a very conscious decision to showcase the wildlife of Karnataka, because we also run 21 of the most popular eco resorts in the country. Even before the word ecotourism became fashionable, we had already started in 1980s itself. We had started eco restaurants. That's the jungle lodges and this thing. And we had focused on these 21 destinations. And today you will see that because of our efforts in the last year or so on the focus of Year of the Wild, we seem to have taken that space for wildlife tourism. And our occupancy rates have almost doubled in the past year. So we are positioning Karnataka not only for wildlife but also wild side of life. So anything to do with adrenaline sports.
Right.
So we had India's first surfing contest, Indian Surfing Open. We had 40,000 footfalls. We had the Kali Kayaking Festival. We had the Bangalore Bouldering Championship, Rock Climbing Championship. Now in the UNESCO World Heritage Sites of Hampi, we will be having the Asian Bouldering Championship. So we are trying to mix heritage and adventure tourism. So like I said, wildlife and wild side of life.
Right.
We are into both.
Wonderful.
So that space is something that we are concentrating on.
Right. So my second last question to you would be, as a young minister in the cabinet at the moment, what challenges do you as a person face in terms of managing your time? How do you do that, and how do you, what is the most challenging thing that you face?
I think, time is not an issue. That's the only thing I have at hand. But I think the challenging thing is actually getting things implemented, because there's so much to do. And there's so much of potential in both my departments, because both the departments can create so much employment. They're one of the highest job creators for the state. Huge potential. So tourism, especially tourism, it creates the biggest thing, and also it's brand building, because both the departments again are looking outwards rather than inwards. So you have to play a brand ambassador for the state as well. So it becomes very tricky to actually, whatever you imagine or whatever is put on paper, you need to put it down on the
Does that become a challenge in a classic government setup too? You're young, you are somebody who's very energetic and wants to implement
you can't say a classic government setup. The setup is to ensure transparency. The setup is to ensure that there is efficiency. So the problem is that there are, I wouldn't say the rules are the problem. It's just trying to get everybody on board. So example, if I want to do something in Hampi, so the Archaeological Survey of India has to be taken into confidence, state archaeology has to be taken into confidence, then tourism needs to be taken into. So let's say if I want to do eco trails, I have to constantly fight with the central government for permissions in forest.
Right.
So let's say I want to do something in the beaches. So the CRZ, it's a very thin line between tourism and environmental issues as well. So, which is, of course, we have to be responsible on that. So I think the most challenging thing that I face is trying to actually implement these things at the speed that we would love to do.
Right. How much of support as a state minister do you get from the union government and other departments?
In the federal structure, we have to work with the union government. Just because they're BJP or we are Congress, that has never been the practice, at least from our end. We do, whenever we write to them, yes, we do get responses, and we have to work with each other, just like how we are brand ambassadors for the state. They are brand
ambassadors. Central government has been very supportive.
We work.
That's a very really interesting answer that you gave. Now, before we wrap up today's show, there are a lot of our users who must be watching it from across the globe, from outside India as well. People who would be interested in investing in India as well. What is your message to them, and also to the people in India, in Karnataka, the youngsters who want to get into more startups, who are currently in college? Both of them, what's your message?
See, for the investors, it's very simple. See, they have two choices. They can come to India. They can look across all the states and then compare it to Bangalore and invest.
Right.
Because this is the place where futures are there, where a future can be made. Or they can just come to Bangalore and just invest right here and don't have to look beyond
Right.
So I've always noticed that people go to different states and then come and settle here. Or once they come here, they don't go anywhere else. So, but if they go elsewhere, they'll also see how good we are in doing business and the ease of doing business. So my message to my investors is very clear. We have the skill sets, we have the knowledge base, we have a government that listens to you. So if you actually look at all our policies, they are friendly because we get the policies from the stakeholders. So we are a government that listens, the ease of doing business is great, and this is the only ecosystem which will help you ideate, innovate and invent. You can go anywhere else, the land is available everywhere.
Right.
But you will not get this entire ecosystem anywhere. That is one thing for the investors. And for the startups, I think my message has always been curious, because being an entrepreneur is, according to me, is one of the toughest things to do. And because they are the people who are trying to bring in the change, the change that they want to see is what they are doing. Because a lot of people just sit and talk or become these armchair thinkers, but these people actually have taken the dive right in and trying to do what other people would not have done. So it's very important for them to stay inspired, because the more inspired they are, the more innovation comes out. The more innovation comes out, the better our lives are going to be. So we are there to support both investors as well as entrepreneurs. So we are a government that listens, and we are there to listen to you. So all they have to do is reach out to us.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Priyank, for this time. It was lovely talking to you. And thank you very much to all of you for tuning into this show today. We will be back next week with the talk with another personality on our show, and we'll be discussing some other issue. Till then, do take good care of yourselves. Thank you very much for tuning in.